The lawyer cleared his throat. My son, Ethan, stared at the single sheet of paper, his face a mask of disbelief. He thought he had me cornered, that my grief had made me weak. He thought the lake house, my life's work, was his for the taking. He had forgotten one crucial detail. He had forgotten what I told his mother I'd do if anyone ever tried to take her sanctuary away. The walls themselves remembered my promise. And walls, as I know better than anyone, can talk. The drive up to the lake house was always a pilgrimage. Every curve in the road whispered a memory of Caroline. Her laugh echoed in the rustle of the pines. For 3 years since she'd been gone, this place was more than wood and stone. It was the last tangible piece of her I had left. I pictured us on the porch, her hand in mine, watching the sunset paint the water in hues of orange and violet. I was bringing her favorite peonies to plant by the steps. But as I rounded the final bend, a knot of ice formed in my gut. A sleek, unfamiliar silver convertible sat in my driveway. On my porch, in my wicker chairs, sat my son Ethan and his wife, Madison. They weren't visiting, they were holding court. Madison, scrolling on her phone, didn't even look up. Ethan just offered a lazy wave, a smug grin plastered on his face. The peonies suddenly felt heavy in my hands. "What's all this, Ethan?" I asked, my voice calm despite the tremor I felt. His grin widened. "Dad, we need to talk. Madison and I have been thinking. This place is too much for you to handle alone. It's a big responsibility." His words were syrupy, patronizing. He spoke to me as if I were a child who'd lost his favorite toy, not the man who built this house with his own 2 hands. Madison finally looked up, her eyes devoid of warmth. Her parents are going to be moving in. Richard. They've sold their place in the city, and this is just perfect for their retirement. It's all arranged. Her tone was final, a gavel striking down on my life. My son, my own flesh and blood, nodded in agreement. "It's for the best, Dad. We'll still come visit, of course." When they're settled, they were kicking me out. Not just from a house, but from my sanctuary, from the vessel of my most cherished memories. They spoke of Caroline's home as if it were a simple asset to be liquidated and redistributed for their convenience. I looked at the rocking chair where Caroline spent her last summer, and a cold fury, pure and hard as diamond, began to form in my chest. They saw a property. I saw a soul. I placed the peonies gently on the porch steps. I looked at my son, at the woman who had replaced any kindness in him with grasping ambition. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who has just seen the entire battlefield with perfect clarity. "Of course," I said, my voice eerily serene. "I understand completely." I turned and walked back to my car without another word. Their confusion was a small, satisfying appetizer. A drive back to Phoenix was silent. I didn't turn on the radio. The roaring in my own head was loud enough. Caroline's voice, a gentle echo from the past, was there too. "Don't you dare let them, Ricky. Don't you dare let them erase me." She never called me Richard when she was serious. It was always Ricky. And she was right. They weren't just taking a house. They were trying to bulldoze our history, to pave over our life together for a new convertible and a convenient place to stash the in-laws. They saw an old man, frail and lost in grief. They underestimated me. It was a mistake many people had made over the years in my business. They saw a simple builder, not the man who could read a blueprint like a novel, and understood that the strength of a structure isn't just in the materials, but in its foundation. My plan, too, would need a solid foundation, and it would be built with the tools I knew best: patience, precision, and a deep understanding of how things are put together. Back in my Phoenix workshop, surrounded by old schematics and tools that felt like extensions of my own hands, the anger cooled into a single focused point of energy. Revenge was too messy a word. This was about justice. It was about teaching a lesson in respect that had clearly been missed. A lesson about legacy. The villa wasn't just sticks and bricks. It was a living testament to a promise I made Caroline. I would honor that promise. My first call was not to a lawyer. It was to Darren, the kid next door, a genius with code and circuits who dropped out of MIT because he said it was too slow. He owed me a favor after I'd helped him soundproof his garage for his noisy server racks. I needed a ghost, I told him. Not a real one, a digital one. One that could live in the walls and make my son's life a living hell. Darren's eyes lit up when I explained the project over coffee the next morning. It wasn't about the money I offered, though that helped. It was the challenge. A fully integrated, undetectable smart home system controlled remotely by a single secure interface. A system designed not for convenience, but for psychological torment. "You want to weaponize the Internet of Things?" he asked, a wide grin spreading across his face. "I love it." We spent the next week mapping out the house for my original blueprints. Every wire, every pipe, every stud in the walls. I knew where all the skeletons were buried, literally and figuratively. We planned to install micro speakers in the vents, temperature sensors that could create sudden cold spots, and actuators on doors and windows. The main electrical panel would be our playground. Everything would be routed through a discrete server hidden in the old wine cellar. The easy part was getting access. I called Ethan. I told him I needed to retrieve some personal effects of his mother's, things I couldn't bear to leave behind. My voice was thick with manufactured grief, the performance of a lifetime. He bought it completely, telling me to be quick, as Madison's parents were arriving with the moving trucks in 2 weeks. He gave me a day, a single day. It was more than enough for me and Darren. We arrived under the cover of a moonless night, our van filled with electronics, not memories. Darren moved like a phantom, pulling wires, installing sensors, his fingers flying across tiny circuit boards. I worked on the heavier installations, using my knowledge of the house's construction to hide our work behind walls and under floorboards. We were two ghosts preparing a haunting, the old master of structure and the young master of code, united in a singular purpose. The crown jewel of our system was the audio. Years ago, I had digitized all our old home videos and cassette tapes to preserve them. Hours of Caroline's voice. Her humming in the kitchen, her laughter by the lake, her gentle whispering of my name. Darren wrote a program that could splice these sounds into faint, disembodied whispers that would emanate from the walls at random, unpredictable intervals. Her ghost would walk the halls again. We finished with hours to spare, leaving no trace of our work. The house was exactly as I'd left it, only now it was alive. It was watching. It was waiting. I took one last look at the porch, picturing their smug faces. Soon they wouldn't be so comfortable in my chairs. I drove away, not with a sense of triumph, but of profound, righteous purpose. The first phase was complete. The trap was set. A week later, the first text came from Ethan. "Dad, weird question. Did you ever have issues with the electricity at the lake house? Lights keep flickering." I replied simply, "Never. It's a new system. Get an electrician to check the breakers." I knew, of course, that any electrician would find nothing wrong. The system Darren installed was a ghost on the line, untraceable. 2 days after that, Madison called me directly, her voice strained. "Richard, the thermostat is broken. It keeps dropping to freezing temperatures at night, but the display says it's warm. And the doors, they keep locking on their own. We got locked in the master bedroom for an hour last night." Her pampered tone was gone, replaced by a new, delightful edge of panic. I feigned concern. "How strange," I said. "That house was always so solid. Maybe it's just settling. Old houses do that, you know. Make noises, have quirks." My words were a careful cocktail of dismissal and insinuation, designed to make them feel like they were overreacting, that they were the crazy ones. The seed of doubt had been planted, and now it was time to water it. That night, I activated the audio. From my laptop in Phoenix, 1,000 miles away, I became the conductor of a ghostly orchestra. I started small. A faint hum, like Caroline's favorite song, echoing from the kitchen. The sound of a page turning in the empty library. The soft click of a door closing down the hall. Just enough to fray the edges of their nerves. Ethan called again, his voice a low, urgent whisper. Dad, I think someone is in the house. We keep hearing things, noises, whispers. I can't explain it. We called the police, but they found nothing. The doors were all locked. We're freaking out here. The satisfaction I felt was immense, a warm current spreading through my chest. The structure was beginning to groan under the strain. Madison's parents lasted less than a week. According to a tearful call from Madison, her mother was convinced the house was haunted. She claimed to have heard a woman whispering her name in the dead of night. They packed their bags and fled back to a hotel in the city, leaving Ethan and Madison to face the presence alone. The first rats were deserting the sinking ship. This was when Ethan's desperation turned to aggression. The next call was not about ghosts. It was a threat. Dad, I know you're behind this somehow. Stop playing games. If you don't cut this out, you will never ever see your grandchildren. You hear me? Madison and I are planning to start a family, and you will be completely cut out. He was trying to use a future I longed for as a weapon against me. The threat, meant to break me, only hardened my resolve. He was leveraging the idea of a family he hadn't even created yet, children who were nothing but a bargaining chip. He was trying to hurt me with the memory of Caroline, who had wanted nothing more than to be a grandmother. He had crossed a line, a sacred one. The games, I thought, haven't even truly begun. I hung up the phone and opened my laptop. It was time for the grand crescendo. Darren had programmed a special sequence we called the Opus. It would activate every system at once in a coordinated symphony of terror. It was designed to be the final, shattering blow to their sanity, to make them run from the house and never look back. I waited until 3 a.m., the witching hour. I took a deep breath, said a silent apology to Caroline for what I was about to do to her home, and clicked execute. In a lakeside villa 1,000 miles away, all hell broke loose. Every light in the house began to flicker violently. The temperature plummeted to just above freezing in seconds. Every television screen simultaneously snapped on, displaying only static, accompanied by an ear-splitting shriek. The smart speakers began broadcasting a layered track of Caroline's whispers, her voice seeming to come from every direction at once. "Ricky, get them out. My house." The words were disjointed, ghostly, and utterly terrifying. Doors slammed open and shut throughout the home, powered by the hidden actuators. The grand finale was the water. I had Darren rig the plumbing controls. The faucets in every bathroom and the kitchen turned on at full blast, first spewing ice-cold water, then steaming hot water, filling the house with a thick, clinging fog. The final touch was the sprinkler system on the lawn, which I had programmed to spray red-colored water onto the windows, making it look as if the house were weeping blood. I watched it all unfold through the discreet security cameras we had installed. I saw them, two figures scrambling in the strobing darkness, screaming. Madison was hysterical, trying to open a front door that would not unlock. Ethan was running from room to room, his bravado utterly shattered, replaced by pure primal fear. It was a terrible, beautiful sight. They finally escaped by shattering a ground floor window and climbing out into the blood-red rain of the sprinklers. They didn't even grab their coats or Madison's purse. They just ran to their car and sped away down the long driveway, leaving the house wailing and flashing behind them like a dying beast. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the laptop illuminating my face. Phase 2 was complete for 2 weeks. There was silence. I shut down the system, letting the house return to its peaceful state. I imagined them huddled in some hotel, trying to explain what they had experienced. Who would believe them? A haunted smart home? They would sound insane. Their greed had led them into a cage of their own making, and I had simply rattled the bars. I knew, however, that this wasn't the end. Their entitlement was a deep well, and fear alone wouldn't be enough to keep them away for good. Once the terror subsided, their greed would reassert itself. They would rationalize, blame a faulty system, and eventually they would come back. I needed a more permanent solution. I needed to remove the house from the equation entirely. The next communication came not from them, but from a law firm. A crisp, formal letter arrived by courier. Mr. Ethan Hayes and Mrs. Madison Hayes were suing me. They were petitioning the court for control of the lake house property on the grounds of my supposed senility and inability to manage my own affairs. They were also suing for emotional distress. I laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that came from my soul. They had fallen into the final part of my trap so perfectly. Their arrogance was as predictable as sunrise. They thought they were moving the battle to their territory, the courtroom. They didn't realize they were marching right into my fortress. I picked up the phone and called my own lawyer. "It's time," I said. "Set up the meeting." A law office was a theater of beige and mahogany, designed to project an aura of unshakable authority. Ethan and Madison sat opposite me, flanking a shark in a tailored suit who was their lawyer. They looked smug, confident, radiating the unearned certainty of those who have always had their way. Madison shot me a look of pure contempt, while Ethan refused to meet my eyes, focusing instead on a point somewhere over my shoulder. They saw this as a formality. Their lawyer began, his voice smooth as polished stone. He painted a picture of a beloved father lost to dementia, a tragic figure whose erratic behavior was a danger to himself and his assets. He described the events at the house not as a haunting, but as a psychotic break. My son and his wife, he purred, were acting only out of love and concern, seeking to protect me from myself. He presented their petition for conservatorship as an act of mercy. I let him finish his performance. My own lawyer, a quiet, methodical woman named Sarah, simply pushed a thin file across the table. She didn't argue about my mental state. She didn't have to. I leaned forward, my hands clasped calmly on the table. "You're referring to the security system," I said, my voice even. Ethan's head snapped towards me, his eyes wide with surprise. His lawyer paused, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry," their lawyer asked. "The security system," I repeated. "The one I designed and installed. It's quite state-of-the-art. Remote environmental controls, holographic sound projection, programmable logic controllers for all access points. I was simply running a full diagnostic. A stress test, you might say. A bit theatrical, I admit, but I needed to be sure all the subroutines were functioning flawlessly. I had to see how it performed under pressure." I proceeded to explain, in excruciating technical detail, every component Darren and I had installed. I talked about server latency, encrypted remote access, and the algorithm used to randomize the audio clips of my late wife's voice. As I spoke, the narrative of the senile old man evaporated, replaced by the reality of a meticulous, dangerously intelligent planner. Madison's face went from smug to pale. Ethan looked like he was going to be sick. That's insane," Madison stammered. "You terrorized us." Their lawyer quickly interjected, trying to regain control. "This is an admission of guilt. It proves our point about his malicious intent and emotional instability." Sarah, my lawyer, finally spoke. "On the contrary," she said calmly, "it proves that my client is of exceptionally sound mind, perhaps a bit eccentric in his methods, but mentally sharp. But this is all, in fact, irrelevant." She slid a single document from her file. It was old, the paper slightly yellowed, but perfectly preserved. "This is the founding charter for the Caroline Hayes Memorial Trust, established 30 years ago when the house was built. As you know, the trust is the legal owner of the property. What you perhaps failed to read in your haste to file this lawsuit is Article 4, Section B. Caroline's Clause, we called it." A knot of dread was now visible on Ethan's face. He knew his moment. Sarah cleared her throat and read the clause aloud. Her voice was steady, each word a hammer blow. "It states that should any direct descendant attempt to forcibly remove the surviving trustee, my client, Richard, from his home or seek to seize control of the trust's primary asset through legal action based on bad faith claims, said descendant immediately and irrevocably forfeits all current and future claims to the trust and its holdings." The room was silent for a moment. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Madison stared, her mouth slightly agape, the gears turning slowly in her mind. Their lawyer read the document for himself, his professional composure cracking. as his face went slack with shock. He looked at Ethan and Madison as if seeing them for the first time, not as clients, but as fools who had just immolated their own case. But that's not all, Sarah continued, her voice turning colder. The clause further stipulates that in such an event, sole and immediate control of the trust, along with all its assets, is to be transferred to a pre-designated beneficiary. Your lawsuit, Mr. Hayes, was the trigger. The moment you filed it, you gave away the very thing you were trying to steal. You activated your mother's final wish. Who? Ethan croaked. Who is the beneficiary? His face was ashen. He was finally seeing the full scope of the chessboard, realizing he had not just been outplayed, but that he had checkmated himself from the very first move. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes, as if I could undo what he had done. But this wasn't my doing. This was Caroline's foresight, her final act of protecting our life together. I slid another folder across the table. Inside was a letter of intent and transfer agreement. The beneficiary, I said softly, is the Sanctuary for Heroes Foundation, a charity that provides lakeside retreats for veterans recovering from physical and psychological trauma. The house will be a place of healing. Something your mother, whose father served in the military, would have loved more than anything. It's already done. The dam broke. Madison erupted. No, she shrieked, slamming her hands on the table. You can't do that. That house is worth millions. It's our future, our inheritance. She turned on Ethan, her face contorted with rage. You idiot. You useless idiot. This is all your fault. You was supposed to handle your crazy old father. Their lawyer was already packing his briefcase, abandoning the sinking ship with professional haste. Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at me, his face a canvas of utter devastation. The smugness, the entitlement, it was all gone. In its place was the raw, ugly truth of what he had become, reflected in his father's steady gaze. He had not just lost a house. He had betrayed a legacy, broken a sacred trust, and revealed the poverty of his own character for all to see. In his grab for a prize, he had lost himself. I signed the final document with a steady hand and pushed it back to Sarah. She nodded, her work here complete. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. The emotional storm raging across the table felt a million miles away. I had built a fortress around Caroline's memory, and its walls had held. I gave Ethan one last look. I hope it was worth it, son. Then I turned and walked out of the room without looking back. The consequences for them were swift and brutal. Their lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, leaving them with a mountain of legal fees. News of my donation to the veterans' charity was picked up by the local press, casting me as a benevolent philanthropist and them as the greedy, monstrous children who tried to swindle their grieving father. Their social standing, which Madison prized above all else, was annihilated overnight. Their relationship, built on the promise of my fortune, crumbled without its foundation. I heard through the grapevine that Madison left Ethan less than a month later. She called him a failure who had cost her a life of luxury. She was a parasite who, having killed her host, was simply looking for a new one. Ethan was left alone in a rented apartment with nothing but his debts and the echo of his own colossal failure. I returned to my life in Phoenix. A quiet rhythm of workshop projects, morning coffee, and long talks with Caroline in the garden. I did not feel vengeful or triumphant. I just felt at peace. The anger had been a tool, one I had used with precision and then put away. I had done what I had to do to protect our sanctuary, and now it was safe. It was more than safe. It was serving a noble purpose. My donation agreement included lifetime visiting rights. That autumn, I drove up to the lake. The house was vibrant with a new kind of life. A group of veterans were on the porch, laughing and sharing stories. The director of the foundation greeted me warmly, telling me how the peace of the lake was already working its magic. They had kept Caroline's garden just as she had left it. I finally planted her peonies by the steps where they belonged. I sat in one of the wicker chairs, a cup of coffee in my hand, and watched the sunset. A young woman, a former army medic, sat with me for a while. She told me this place had saved her, that for the first time in years, she felt quiet in her own head. I told her about Caroline, about how she had always said the lake had a healing soul. We didn't talk long, but it was a moment of profound connection. The house was healing others, just as it had always healed me. 6 months later, during one such visit, a familiar car pulled into the long driveway. It was Ethan. He was alone. He looked thinner, older. The expensive clothes and arrogant posture were gone. He approached the porch slowly, hesitantly, like a stranger. He didn't look at the house, only at me. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. He looked completely and utterly lost. "I know I have no right to be here," he started, his voice cracking. "And I don't expect you to forgive me. I had to come. I had to say it. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. For Madison. For the things I said. For what I tried to do. For not being the son Mom wanted me to be." The words were simple, unadorned with excuses. They were the truest things he had said to me in a decade. I didn't offer him a hug or easy absolution. Some wounds are too deep for a simple bandage. I just nodded slowly, studying his face. "I see that," I said. He flinched, expecting more, expecting anger or dismissal. But there was none left. I pointed to the other wicker chair. "The first step is a long one, Ethan. Sit down. Tell me where you're going to go from here." He looked surprised. Then a flicker of something like hope appeared in his tired eyes. He sat, and we talked for hours as the sun went down. Not as a conqueror and the vanquished, but as a father and a son who had lost their way from each other. It was not a magical fix. The trust was broken, the damage done. But it was a beginning, a new foundation, perhaps, laid on the hard, solid ground of truth. A long, difficult road to reconciliation. But for the first time, it was a road we were both willing to walk. He left after dark, promising to call. I stayed on the porch, the cool night air settling around me. I thought about the nature of family, how it could be both a fortress and a battlefield. I had fought a war to protect my home, only to realize that a home isn't the wood and nails. It is the memories you build within it, the love you shelter, and the legacy you leave behind. It's a foundation of respect. The house was no longer mine, but in a way, it was more mine than ever. It was now a living monument to Caroline's spirit of kindness and strength. Its rooms, once destined to echo with the hollow voices of entitlement, were now filled with the laughter and healing of heroes. She would have liked that. She would have loved what her house had become. It was no longer just a memory. It was a living, breathing promise. Justice, I mused, is not always about punishment. Sometimes it is about restoration. It is about taking something that was broken and making it whole again, even if it's in a different shape. My son broke our family. In turn, I broke his greedy plans. But from those shattered pieces, something better was being built. For the veterans, for the house, and maybe, just maybe, for Ethan and me. I leaned back and looked up at the stars, countless and bright over the dark, placid water. I felt Caroline's presence beside me, her hand in mine, just as I had pictured it so many months ago. The peonies were thriving. The house was safe. A quiet voice whispered in the gentle breeze, a voice only I could hear. "You did good, Ricky. You did good." And for the first time in 3 long years, my heart felt truly, completely at peace. The path forward with Ethan was not simple. It involved therapy for him and difficult conversations for us both. He had to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, to find worth in himself, not in what he could acquire. I learned to see the son I raised underneath the man he had become. It was a slow process of rebuilding, brick by painful brick, a structure that had been nearly demolished. But this time, the foundation was stronger. Madison never contacted either of us again. Her name became a footnote in a painful chapter, a cautionary tale about a love that was merely a transaction. I heard she moved to another state, likely in search of another fortune to attach herself to. I felt nothing for her, not even anger. She was simply irrelevant to the new life Ethan and I were carefully trying to construct. I never gave Ethan another dime. Instead, I gave him something more valuable: my time, my advice when he asked for it, and the hard-earned wisdom of my years. He got a modest job, started paying off his debts, and began to resemble the boy I once knew, the one who loved building things with his hands in my workshop. He was rediscovering the value of creating something, rather than just taking it. On the anniversary of Caroline's passing, he came with me to the lake house. We didn't talk much. We just sat on the porch and watched the veterans fishing on the dock. He turned to me at one point. "I finally get it, Dad," he said quietly. "I finally understand what this place meant to her, to you. It was never about the money." "I know, son," I replied. "I know." The house stood as a testament not to my revenge, but to my love for Caroline. It was a symbol that true wealth isn't measured in property values or inheritances, but in the integrity you maintain and the good you can put into the world. My son had to lose everything to learn that lesson, a lesson I would have much preferred to teach him gently. But some lessons, I suppose, can only be learned in the fire. Looking out at the water, a gentle breeze rustling the pines, I knew my work was done. I had defended our home, honored my wife, and in the process, I may have just saved my son. The structure was sound, the foundation was secure, and the legacy of the Lakeside villa was no longer just mine and Caroline's. It belonged to every soul who found a moment of peace on its quiet, welcoming porch.